Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
How should we talk about Jaguar Land Rover? It's a bit like a rejected version of West Side Story. How do you solve a problem like Maria? How shall we talk about Jaguar Land Rover today? 40,000 employees, 80 billion... It's not 80 billion, is it? Did I read that correctly? Yep, sorry, 80 billion pounds worth. Do you know that if we double our fishing fleet, if we double the amount of fish we catch, it will be just shy of 2 billion? That's it, 2 billion a year. The entire fishing fleet in Britain, doubling its catch, right? They would be just shy of 2 billion. And they're still shouting fish from the sidelines. Fish, 2 billion. Maximum, if we double what we're doing now, if we're somehow able to negotiate that, a doubling of our current fishing quotas. Unbelievable. Because Jaguar Land Rover have announced that £80 billion worth of investment could be... well, we'd be waving goodbye to it over the next 5 years. This would be in jeopardy should we be faced with the wrong outcome. I heard Owen Patterson on another radio station this morning explaining that the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to talking about Jaguar Land Rover, and they'll be able to fly, I don't know, car parts in from China or something, presumably by Unicorn.
Britain's largest car manufacturer, Jaguar Land Rover, is warning the government that it needs greater certainty over Brexit if it's going to safeguard the 40,000 jobs they have in the UK. Our reporter Phil Edwards is here, and they follow the likes of BMW, Audi, Nissan as well.
Similar warnings, yeah, but this is, as you say, Britain's biggest manufacturer. It's not just the 40,000 jobs, Tom, directly involved with the various plants, but 260,000 as well in the supply chain. They're also big investors as well. Now, they've invested some £50 billion over the past 5 years or so, and they have plans to invest a further £80 billion over the next 5 years. But the chief executive, Ralph Speth, has said while its heart and soul are in the UK, without frictionless trade, its planned investment could be in jeopardy. He also reckons that a bad Brexit deal could cost the company £1.2 billion in profits every year. It's probably worth saying at this point, though, that they recently announced plans to switch production of the Discovery model to Slovakia, and that could result in a number of job losses. Now, the Business Secretary, Greg Clark, has tweeted the following. He has said, JLR is a great British success story. We are determined to make sure that it can continue to prosper and to invest in Britain. But just to put things into perspective, this is a company that exported 80% of the cars it made last year to 130 different countries around the world. It's a real flag waver, of course, JLR, and it contributed £2 billion in tax to the Treasury coffers. More pressure then on the Prime Minister, who, as we know, sits down with her cabinet ministers to try to thrash out a final strategy for exiting the EU. That's on Friday, and that is now seen as a crucial meeting.
Yeah, big meeting. Jaguar Land Rover, front page of the FT today.
The latest company to send a shot across the bows of the government on the subject of Brexit is Jaguar Land Rover. Its chief executive, Ralph Speth, has told the Financial Times that the company is committed to Britain, but he would move abroad if it was the only option to save the company. And if I am forced to go out, then we will close plants here in the UK. That is what he says. Simon Jack is our business editor and is on the line. And he's not normally a hugely political guy, is he?
No, he has not wanted to get into this fray at all. He's a pretty reasonable, low-key sort of guy, an academic and an engineer. So, but he's, you know, he realises we've got a massive summit on Friday tomorrow, and he is the latest, as you say, after the likes of Airbus, BMW and Nissan to say, look, if we get no deal, we've got a real problem about investing in the future. Now, the government will say no deal is not what anybody wants. It's not what we want. It's not what Brussels wants. And so that is a threat that doesn't really exist. But all of them will say that even if we do get a deal, any kind of Brexit which threatens the movement of components, and some of these components can cross between the UK and the EU several times in the life cycle of a product, that will cause hold-ups. It means we have to build warehouses to store this stuff. Honda was looking, for example, saying we need 9 days' worth of parts in case of delays at the ports. If we have to build a building, that will be the biggest building on Earth. So what they're trying to say is make this as frictionless as possible. I think this does give a bit of grist, you know, power to the elbow of the Prime Minister is going to try and sell a deal to her wider cabinet tomorrow night, which looks like a very soft version of Brexit, which means that we would collect tariffs on behalf of the EU, obviating the need for customs checks at the border, and also we would stay very closely aligned on regulatory matters. So
that last point is a really important one, isn't it? Because it may well be something too far for the Brexiteers to go, but from the point of view of the car industry, other industries as well who've been speaking out, that is really important.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to one of these factories, and I've been to quite a few of them over the last couple of years, you see hundreds of lorries arriving every day, unloading parts, which arrive not just in time, but just in sequence. You know, the yellow wing mirror arrives at the same time as the yellow car chassis does. And if you have those delays, then all of that is thrown into, is majorly disrupted. And that's why they're saying that you've got to have the regulatory piece of this as well. Now, that, of course, is very difficult for some of the hard Brexiteers to swallow, because if you've got regulatory alignment, you've got customs partnership, what was the point of Brexit? Someone would say, we want to be able to do our own thing, go off and do our own thing. That is the bitter pill they would have to swallow. But, so there's an almighty row probably tomorrow night, but this Jaguar Land Rover intervention will help those pushing for a softer Brexit.
Simon Jack, thank you. Let us turn to Owen Paterson, who is, of course, Conservative MP, former Minister, keen Brexiteer, is on the line. Good morning to you.
Hello, Justin, good morning.
Do you think Jaguar Land Rover are just making this up?
No, not at all. But I think what is good is that they are asking for what the government's asking. And it also happens to be what Donald Tusk said he wanted back in March. When Donald Tusk said, I propose that we aim for a trade agreement covering all sectors and with zero tariffs on goods. I mean, a lot of these stories, go back to the old Project Fear stuff during the referendum campaign, all assume we're going to have tariffs. The government's been completely clear. We want to have zero tariffs.
Yes, but hold on a second on that. What the government also wants to be able to say, and what a lot of Conservative MPs want to be able to say, is that no deal is still an option. And what Jaguar Land Rover are very clearly saying is that no deal would kill us, we'd have to leave the country.
Well, no, I'm not quite right, Justin. I don't think so. I think what they're saying is no deal automatically means tariffs. It doesn't. Also...
Well, hang on, surely it does. It has to.
No.
Why not?
If we go to World Trade terms, we decide our tariffs, we can have zero tariffs.
But the European Union would have tariffs on our stuff when it went across to them.
Yep. If you look at studies of the car trade, it's robustly competitive and profitable at the moment, and that will continue because we've had a significant devaluation, which is a lot more than the tariffs anyway.
But they would have significant friction. Sorry to interrupt, but it's such a crucial point, isn't it? It's the friction. It's never mind the amount of the tariff, the amount of fuss getting stuff to and from. And in a no-deal Brexit, that would have to be there, wouldn't it?
No, that is illegal under WTO current terms. The latest WTO trade facilitation agreement insists that both sides must have a seamless, i.e. effectively computerised, as now for the rest of the world, procedures which are effectively costless. But you just cut me off the key point. The reason why it is very much in Jaguar Land Rover's interest, and they're massively important. I'm speaking to you from Shropshire. They're incredibly important. They're plants in the West Midlands, on the Merseyside, the huge number of suppliers. Everyone's incredibly proud of what Tata have achieved, turning them around. This enormous investment. Only 10 days ago, they agreed to put another 20 billion in, which I don't think you covered on your programme. But what is really vital is that they will be better off if the government delivers on what the Prime Minister promised me in the Commons yesterday. If we really do leave the customs union, hang on, the really important is Jaguar Land Rover will have access to cheap parts and components all around the world, and the European suppliers currently will be forced to compete, or they will lose Jaguar Land Rover's business. And all the studies show the car trade is very robust at the moment, it is profitable, and that will continue.
We heard from Sir Mike Rake earlier in the programme, the anti-Brexit campaigner, it's fair to say, isn't it? Former BT chairman. He says business hasn't been listened to. Is it being listened to now?
Yes, of course it is. The massive public debate. You've got it on this morning. It's been going on all week. But I think what is really important is for business to get behind the Prime Minister. She has said all along she wants seamless free trade. We don't want any tariffs anywhere. And under those conditions, a newly independent UK outside the customs union, outside the single market and outside the ECJ, as she promised yesterday, will have access to the world. And our current European suppliers, who we value a lot, will have to compete on world terms. And that will bring prices down for every business and every single family.
And talking about...
Hang on, how really important is you always have on your programme, you're always having producers mainly interested in the 12% of GDP which goes to Europe. The 88% of the UK economy has nothing to do with exports to Europe. And the other point is that Europe is not growing as fast as the rest of the world. Look at Jaguar Land Rover. The fastest area of growth last year was China, 23% growth, 146,000 cars there. But very, very importantly, hang on, they built 80,000 cars in China last year. Jaguar Land Rover not standing still. If we don't make the UK world competitive...
But they're doing all that. They're doing all that within the EU, it's fair to say, isn't it?
Exactly. That's exactly the point I'm making. So Jaguar Land Rover not static. They've just opened a brand new plant in Slovakia, which is going to build 150,000 cars a year.
Let me put you... We're slightly running out of time. Look, we're slightly running... Can I put you on the subject of backing the Prime Minister? Do you back the Prime Minister on this third way, the facilitated customs arrangements, so we stay in regulatory alignment with the EU when it comes to goods and we collect the external tariff on our borders and hand it on? Can that work?
Well, this is yet another leak which we haven't seen. I go with what she told me in the Commons yesterday, that she wants to leave the customs union, leave the single market, leave the ECJ, and have the ability to do free trade deals around the world, and very, very importantly, buy components which will massively help Jaguar Land Rover as it grows its exports to China and other markets.
So, Mr. Patterson, you do not believe that it is feasible for the government to go to Europe and say we want to stay inside the single market for regulations on goods, that is not something that would be acceptable to you?
I don't think it's feasible for the government not to deliver the verdict of the referendum, which is endorsed by 85% of the votes of the Conservative and Labour parties in the general election, to leave the customs union, leave the single market and leave the ECJ, because that will put Jaguar Land Rover in a wonderful position to compete worldwide, because it'll be able to buy components cheaper around the world. It will drive down prices of its European suppliers.
Owen Patterson, thank you.
Can I throw you the question today? What question would you like other callers to answer? Because I'm not being lazy, I'm being really original and challenging. I'm ripping up the rule book. I'm not just being lazy and getting you to do the heavy lifting, because I don't know what question to ask. These are some of the contenders that I would put on the list. I still would like to know about your business being affected, and obviously, if it's not being affected, it's not of interest in this conversation. It was Kieran the van driver. Kieran the van driver has become a Brexit celebrity since we met him on this programme. Not only because he mugged Jacob Rees-Mogg on Nick's show in the following days, but he even gave a speech at that big march. He was up on the stage. I just did a double take when I saw that. He's made offers to various Brexiters to take them to the so-called invisible borders that they keep talking about, because they're not invisible. And he knows, and I hate the way, that he's been sort of not written off, but slightly denigrated. The Kieran the van driver. He's not just a van driver. Not that there's anything wrong with being just a van driver, but he runs a business that transports across all of these borders several times a day. He happens also to drive one of the vans himself, but it's his understanding of customs law and the actual reality at these borders that has given him such an astonishing insight into these matters. And that's welcome today, because it's increasingly clear, isn't it, that they haven't got a clue what they're talking about, the Rees-Moggs and the Owen Pattersons and the Digby Joneses. They genuinely haven't got a clue. And I don't think they're ever going to admit that. How deluded and arrogant would you have to be to hear the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover warning that 80 billion quid's worth of investment and 40,000 jobs are in jeopardy, and to turn around and say, no, I know better? That's where we are now. This is what he is saying. This is the fear. Oh, no, I know better. And that is why I think, journalistically, I genuinely don't know what question to ask. I can't sit here and say, how deluded are they? How arrogant are they? I mean, how could anybody possibly think that they're right? Chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover says one thing, they say another. Who are they? You can probably tell it's a source of befuddlement to me. And I genuinely don't know what we need to shuck the oyster. What blade do we need to open this oyster up? So, look, if you've got a business that would be affected by any form of border checks or friction at the borders, give me a call on 0345 6060 973. But I think, and obviously I really want to hear good news as well as perhaps potential bad news, But I think I'm going to go big picture today, unless you can come up with a brilliant question that you want everyone else to answer. Best thing to do with that is text it to 84850. I think I want to know, what do you think is going to happen now? What do you think is going to happen now? 0345 6060 973. We might have a row if you say something completely bonkers, but if we keep it sensible, this should be more light than heat, more kind of illumination than anything else. What do you think is going to happen now? Genuinely, what do you think is going to happen now? I think I might be a little bit too entrenched. I've gone down my own rabbit hole on this. And I mean, I could sit here for an hour and point out all the things I told you that were going to happen that have now happened, despite the fact that people like Owen Paterson, Digby Jones and Jacob Rees-Mogg swore blind they would never happen. They are now happening. I told you that the Irish border would be absolutely key because I've read the Good Friday Agreement. That's all. I'm not a genius. I've got no particular insights. And I told you that the idea of somehow being able to retain all the benefits of being in the single market while giving up our responsibilities and abnegating the freedoms of all the other people in the single market was never going to wash with Brussels. I still hope I'm wrong about that. I can't quite see how I will be. But what do you think is going to happen? This is 2 years now under which British business have been left completely in the dark about the trading conditions under which they're going to have to operate from when? From March of next year, or at the end of the transition period, or at the end of an as yet unspecified period of flux? I don't run a business, but if I did, and I had any form of custom or trade with European Union countries, with fellow members of the single market, I think I'd be furious. The information I've received is that a lot of the big businesses, if you're wondering why the hell didn't they speak up sooner, the information I've received, which I think is reliable, it's not particularly scoop-tastic, the bottom line is that a lot of big businesses have been warned that subsidies and or lucrative government contracts would be jeopardised by publicly criticising the government. But there comes a point where you have to. There comes a point where whatever carrots Theresa May is dangling in front of the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover become ridiculous, because the stick of not knowing what Brexit will bring is so enormous now for these massive multi-billion pound budget managers that it doesn't matter anymore if they upset the government. They've made a kind of pragmatic utilitarian decision to just shout a little bit late in the day, arguably, but now they're just shouting, for God's sake, tell us what is going to happen. And again, it appears that Brussels have probably already rejected whatever fudge Theresa May manages to cook up at Chequers this weekend. So, yeah, let's do that. 0345 6060 973. What do you think is going to happen? Genuinely, what do you think is going to happen? Because I'll tell you briefly what I think. I think Theresa May is going to have to, she's going to have to put something together that essentially leaves us in the customs union. At least the customs union. She's going to have to do that. And I can't quite see Brussels going for anything remotely resembling that unless we agree to the freedom of movement as well. And if we have to agree to the freedom of movement, then they'll throw in some caveats, which we're already able to do, like you can only come here if you've got a job. I reckon they'd be able to tweak that. Problem is, imposing it's going to cost way, way, way more money than it's ever going to save. She knows all this. It's why, for a brief period at the beginning of her premiership, I actually felt quite sorry for her on a human level. I can't quite see what else is going to happen. And then that's when you come up against the brick walls. The positions outlined, because very few of them will do it in public now. They have to send out the Digby Joneses and the Owen Patersons and the Jacob Rees-Moggs. But you've got Johnson and Gove in the cabinet, who presumably know that any concession on freedom of movement, however much they may have pretended that their support wasn't based on xenophobia, they would not have got over the line without xenophobia. And freedom of movement is like garlic is to a vampire for xenophobes. So let's just do that. Sorry to go on and end up at such a simplistic question. What do you think is going to happen? 0345 6060 973. What do you think is going to happen? And I don't demand a degree of understanding of the issues, but I reserve the right to point out misunderstandings or there's so much misinformation around. You'll get no criticism from me for having swallowed it, but I would reserve the right to reach into your craw and wrench out whatever nugget of misinformation has been placed there by the likes of Digby Jones, Owen Paterson and Jacob Rees-Mogg. 1016. Any sort of thing you want to say, really, about the Jaguar Land Rover chief executive warning that £80 billion worth of investment over the next 5 years could be wrenched out of this country unless we have completely identical, really, customs arrangements with the European Union to what we have now. That's the bottom line, isn't it? Anything changes, it will be detrimental. If we come out with no deal or a bad deal, it will be worse than detrimental. It will be 80 billion quid over 5 years. And remember, for the unicornists shouting fish, that is, if we double what we do now overnight, which we're not going to be able to do, but for the sake of argument, let's pretend that we can. We double overnight what our fishing fleet currently lands. That will still come in at less than 2 billion a year. This is 80 billion from one car company over 5 years. Sayonara. Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye. Claire is in Kensington. Claire, what's going on?
Hi, James. First time caller. Big fan of yours on Twitter, I have to say.
Very welcome.
Anyway, getting past that. What I want to say is I worked as a business lawyer and I've also run my own business. And so I'm not pretending that I ran Jaguar, but I think the people that are saying, oh, don't be silly, it's just not that difficult, are being very disingenuous, because the overriding things that business needs to make investment is certainty.
Yes.
And Brexit is uncertain because it's just such a hash and they haven't really worked out how they would navigate it, what kind of deal it's going to look like. And for a business like Jaguar, which is really dependent on logistics and just in time and vast complexity, they're not going to be able to handle making an investment where there's so much uncertainty. It's just not worth their while. It's not worth it for their shareholders and so on.
And what they don't have is any form, I don't want to use the word loyalty, because there's clearly a loyalty to the workers and the workforce, but they don't have any sort of geographical fealty. There's no, because the chief executives are German, the owners of the company are Indian. They're going to have a heritage, because the idea of Jaguar Land Rover not being in Britain anymore, even though it's not, technically British, it's part of the heritage of the country's industrial past. But they won't prioritise that over pragmatic business decisions, will they? And Brexit supporters seem increasingly to be prioritising some sort of emotional feeling over pragmatic business decisions, and the German chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover just ain't going to play that game.
Well, it's just a sticking plaster of their own inadequacies, because...
You think? That's a bit strong. I completely agree, but that is a little bit strong.
Name any business, large business in the UK that's entirely run by British people, hasn't got any very well qualified people from overseas working for, or doesn't export. I mean, it's just la-la land, really.
And what then? I mean, do you know people that are still on the Brexit side of the fence?
A couple of people, yeah. I'm going to have to say, where I live, most of the people I know are European or very liberal or whatever, and are just completely still horrified. But I know that's my particular bubble. But no, I do have family members who are still Brexiteers, but they're kind of sheepish.
And then I just wonder what straw will break that camel's back, because, especially for the people who typify themselves as right-wing, who are normally genuflecting on one knee to the interests and the concerns of big business, and suddenly big business don't know what they're talking about and need to be ignored. BMW, Airbus, and now Jaguar Land Rover, figures that are almost unbelievably large, £80 billion over 5 years. At what point do they go, oh, crikey, it wasn't Project Fear, was it, after all? And I don't know how psychologically and emotionally, how you process that information. How do you take that size of a hit to your ego? Because that's the alternative. Either they take a hit that size to their ego, or they carry on pursuing this destructive and ludicrous path.
Absolutely, but I think it's also a concern that a lot of the people who think like that I know are, they fit windows, or they work in a very small business or whatever, and they perceive those people, like you say, to be fat cats who aren't from here, and why should we listen to them? And they've got it made anyway, and they don't know how hard it is for a small business person to work. But I think it's just going to be proof is in the pudding when it actually happens. But
every time
it's not going to happen one big thing, is it's going to be dribbling destruction.
Well, I don't know, because there is a cliff edge, and this is the negotiation at the moment. The biggest game in town at the moment is pretending that there isn't a cliff edge, or trying to postpone the cliff edge, or thinking that it could somehow be slowly introduced. I don't know where the cliff edge is. I don't think it's March 2019 as such. It could still be if it's no deal, but that's the problem, and all of these people, all of these shysters, get to kick the can a little bit further down the road by saying something will turn up, or it will be fixed, or they need us more than we need them, or they'll never do this thing that the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover worries that they do. Thank you, Claire. Lovely debut. David is in Oslo, in Norway. David, what would you like to say?
3 points I'd like to make, James.
Of course.
Thanks for taking the call.
You're very
welcome.
welcome.
First point is that people have already started moving manufacturing out of the UK, and in some cases into countries where the cost base is higher.
Hang on, just can I pause you briefly? Are you going to be giving us 3 relatively grim pieces of information?
No, not grim.
But it's not going to be good news. It's not going to be good news. No, of course it's factual, I know that. But I'm just thinking, do I need to lighten up the tone of the programme by adopting the guise of the late Jim Bowen and introducing your 3 points by going, in one? Can we do that or not? Or would that be silly?
You can.
OK, well, let's start.
Give me a Brucey bonus.
Let's start. You might get a Brucey. No, it's bully, isn't it? Anyway, I get you. Okay, we'll start again. David is in Oslo. He has 3 points about the uncertainty British business and European business are accommodating in the context of our ludicrous Brexit negotiations. David, in one.
In one, we have the fact that a UK manufacturer is going to manufacture somewhere with a higher cost base because of the uncertainties. Their parent company is German and got fed up with waiting for clarity.
You know this. This is something you're personally involved in.
Oh, I've just come out of the meeting.
Well, literally just come out of a meeting where the decision was taken to move or to manufacture in whereabouts?
We will be
in Norway,
partnering with them on the manufacture.
And that would have been done in Britain if Brexit.
It would have been done in Britain, yes.
In two,
I believe that any company in the UK, while always uncertainties about, who were considering going somewhere to save money, have now got another excuse for doing so.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So people might even say, we're not doing this because we're crass profiteers. We're doing this because of Brexit uncertainty. Oh, but look, it's exactly the decision we would have made if we were crass profiteers.
Yep.
And you know what's coming next? Can you remember 3? Because I sometimes do this on the radio. So I've got
know what 3 is, yeah.
Right. In 3.
I think Mrs May will end up having to do exactly what was suggested when Brexit was the Brexit negotiations were started, and maybe go for a Norwegian deal, which should be fantastic for the UK. So we still have to abide by the rules. We still pay in, but we lose our voting rights. So we like a fantastic deal.
Well, I mean, Norway like it actually. I mean, that line you just said about being rule takers, not rule makers, is true. But the Norwegian model does seem quite popular with Norwegian people, doesn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, that's the best we can hope for. But then there's no restrictions on freedom of movement, and the xenophobic wing of the Brexit movement go they go even more gammony than usual.
They do indeed.
It's a technical term there. I'm glad that you're familiar with it. My solution would be to actually start. You know that old, was it an old oil field or something in the North Sea that's like a separate kingdom? Just rename that the Independent Republic of Gamonia, and if you don't like it, you can move there. Paul's in Dublin. Paul, what would you like to say?
We've a small business here in Ireland, and we sell into the UK an intermediate product. We have done for years because it's just easy. Culturally, it's easy. Yeah. But the company we sell into is a large multinational, and post-Brexit, we'll probably sell straight into France because they have an outlet in France. But it's just easier for us in the UK because when I pick up the phone and talk to the people in the UK, they speak English, and it's just handier. But I would imagine after Brexit, the hassle of all the VAT.
What needs to stay for your company? What would need to stay in place for it not to become the pragmatic choice to shift to a French company as opposed?
We don't know exactly what it's going to be like.
No, I know, but what do you need it to be like to stay doing the business with Britain?
Well, it stayed the same because we're actually going to sell to the same company in France. Like it's the same, they're owned by the same multinational.
Yeah.
And increasingly, I found increasingly you're seeing in Irish reports here of new ferry lines opening up from Dublin straight to Zeebrugge, Dublin to. Normally what we'd use, people who export to the continent would use the UK as a land bridge, but that's not going to be possible. But it looks like after Brexit. So we'll just stick our stuff straight on a boat here in Dublin and send it straight to continental Europe and go around the UK. It'll be a hassle. It will be a hassle.
But it will be a smaller hassle than jumping through whatever hoops Brexit. Well, I mean, the hoops, we don't even know what the hoops are. Some of them might be on fire. There might be flaming hoops, like at Croft, so there might be tiny hoops. We don't even know what the hoops are like. We just want to know what the hoops are like so we can know how hard we're going to have to work to get through the hoops.
Exactly. A lot of people say to us, like, how are you preparing for Brexit? And we're actually not doing anything, really, because we haven't a clue what's going to happen. Because it's kind of, we're just going to live with it, because we don't have any real choice but just to live with it.
Well, that is the sanguine approach. We don't have any real choice but to live with it. Of course, I come back to Paul now and say, live with what? And 2 years after the vote, the British government turn around to the British people and say, well, we don't know yet. Live with what, boss? Don't know yet. I've got 80 billion quid to invest in this country over 5 years. Can you tell me what the investment environment will be? Can you tell me what the manufacturing terms and conditions will be? Can you just tell me what the business landscape will look like? No, sorry. And what did Boris Johnson say? I can't expect Ivan to have the bleep ready, but you remember what Boris Johnson said, and that is why he said it, because all of these concerns are now mounting up. The Foreign Secretary, leader of the Leave campaign, Boris Johnson, his response was, bleep business. Jaguar Land Rover warned in 2016, repeatedly actually, that Brexit would probably take a huge chunk out of their revenues. 2 years later, they have confirmed that up to 80 billion quid could be removed from the British economy and 40,000 jobs. If they can't carry on doing business with the continent like they do now, if the parts can't carry on coming in from France and Germany in exactly the same way that they do now, they will move. Because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? You just would. That's the whole point that this country never understood, and I'm guilty of it as well, is that these people see Europe as a market, as homogenous. They don't see it as... I think, and don't laugh, I've got Kieran on the line, actually, stuck outside Paris in traffic, so we'll be with him imminently, and he can confirm this for me. This is, for me, a silly little thing that I think is really significant. When you're in Europe, continental Europe, as opposed to here, you often see on road signs cities that are in countries other than the one that you're in. And I know this sounds silly and trivial, but if you're tooling around the south of France and there's a sign for Zurich or Geneva or whatever, don't pick me up on the geography. My geography's not great. Or you're knocking around northern France or western France and there's a sign for Berlin is so many kilometres away. And I know they've got their share of headbangers and xenophobes, but their direction... It's another thing the British media misses, is that when Germans or Italians get upset about, quotes, immigration, end quotes, it's actually refugees and asylum seekers that they're angry about. They're not angry about French people moving to Italy or Polish people moving to France. They're angry about people who aren't in the European Union. So all the racists in this country then jump on the bandwagon and pretend that the other countries like Italy have the same concerns as them, i.e. they hate all foreigners, except the racist foreigners who they love. So that's problem number one, is that they talk about migration and immigration. They're two completely different things. But the simplest way to understand the continental mindset, the European mindset, is to look at the road signs. And it just doesn't feel as if you're climbing a mountain, And that is why it is hard even for us to perhaps grasp how this would be a really straightforward decision, albeit a regrettable one, for Airbus or BMW or Jaguar Land Rover. Kieran is not in Romford, as it says on the screen. He is, I happen to know from a tweet, stuck in traffic in Paris. So you're on a job, Kieran?
I am.
Shall we discuss your burgeoning celebrity before we move on to the substance of today's call?
Do you know what? I'm the normal guy in a normal job, and I am a van driver, and I run my own business, but I couldn't sit in an office. I do like my job,
I hear you. And you were on the stage at the People's Vote March.
I was taken aback, actually, to be honest, to be asked. But
how did you get on?
I couldn't speak properly into the mic at first.
Oh, bless.
But listen, I've never even done karaoke and held a mic in my life, let alone stood on a stage in front of God knows how many hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah. But I got into the throes of it, you see.
I know you did.
I want to thank you for putting me on that first time, because I didn't realise how many people didn't understand how goods come in and out of Europe.
Nor did I.
See?
Nor did I.
And I opened so many eyes, and then I thought to myself, it is my job, you know?
Yeah.
And it's what I know, and I've taught myself.
And you just do it. I mean, I found it astonishing. I mean, I knew at the time that you'd opened up a can of worms, so to speak, because you were actually doing it. And obviously, Owen Patterson, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Digby Jones know a hell of a lot more about running your company than you do. We have to obviously make that clear for reasons of balance. But you're actually doing it every single day. And you were in your van when you rang in, and I think that's why it kind of blew the doors off, because no one can argue with you. You're there, you're doing it, you're in Paris now. You are literally delivering stuff that is relevant to the just-in-time supply chain. What's going on? What's the latest?
Well, I've got to go to Brussels after this.
Good grief.
I've just been told.
It's ridiculous.
So Paris, Brussels, back home. Anyway, the thing is that Jaguar and Land Rover have come out and said this, along with Nissan, which was in this one newspaper up here where they are. The Land Rover Discovery is going to be built in Eastern Europe, as you probably read a few weeks ago.
Yes, I did, but they did say that wasn't necessarily linked to Brexit.
Well, it's not a good sign when you move production of one vehicle out of the UK. You'd like to think it'd be built here. But anyway, over the last 20 years, our manufacturing base has been built around membership of the customs union and the single market, the access to goods in other countries, and the freedom of movement of those goods. And when you remove those barriers, when you remove when you take the customs union away, you get rid of the just-in-time supply chain to run them. So if you buy, you purchase headlights from northern Spain, where they come from, or airbags from Germany, or air filters from France, I can just get a call, pick them up, and drop them off the next day. And it won't happen. And here's another one for you with some figures. I'm sure you've read them. I was at Dover Docks last night, and 8,000 trucks went through it yesterday. Right? There's 258 lanes in Dover, and each lane only holds 4 trucks. So you times 4 times 258 and see what figure you come to.
1,032.
Exactly. And it's not even half of one-way traffic going out in one day. It's a mad idea.
When little Lord Fauntleroy, when Jacob Rees-Mogg says that it would just be like Portsmouth or Southampton, Dover's got nothing to worry about. He completely shoots your fox, doesn't he?
Well, Southampton's a railway port, and I've exported cars out of Southampton to Mozambique for a friend. And you send them out to the berth.
That's a chapter of the autobiography I'm looking forward to.
I tell you what, I stole one of my work vans many years ago to a Portuguese guy from Mozambique.
Oh, right? Fair enough.
He came over, he flew over to buy it, because they were so expensive in South Africa that he come to the UK because they're right-hand drive.
Blimey.
So he ended up coming over every year and staying with me and buying all these cars.
Lovely.
And you had to get them inspected, you had to get them valued, you had to have a receipt and an invoice, you had to send them down to Southampton. It took a month to get them over there, and I had to do all of this. So I learned the hard way how to export to a country where you don't have a trade deal, right? And it was a nightmare. It was horrible.
Let me read you a quick text from someone who's got the hump. You are mental, O'Brien. Waited to speak to you for 20 minutes but had to hang up. EU is a cabal. Jaguar Land Rover would source parts at cheaper costs if out of the EU. The customs union, the cabal, keeping prices inflated at higher prices so we can source a cheaper version. It possibly knows more about running your business than you know about running your business, but perhaps you could address that little soldier.
Well, put it this way. I put in a tweet this morning. Why buy airbags from Germany and get them on an overnight service when you can get them from China and wait 4 weeks for them to come over on a boat? What you can do? Stop the production line.
They could come on a plane. Could they come on a plane?
Could you imagine the cost of sending over car parts on a plane on a just-in-time delivery?
No.
It just wouldn't. The logistics would not work. The whole thing is,
you need to believe more.
Absolutely.
You need to get behind it, mate. It's your fault it's going wrong.
Listen, do you know what? I'm running an hour late for this just-in-time delivery because the traffic this morning is a bloody nightmare.
And 1 hour makes a difference.
It does.
So what the hell does 2 hours or 3 hours or 2 days or a week do?
It actually does quite a lot because I've done one. I think I mentioned to you. I've done one from Stuttgart to Dagenham engine planting there in Dagenham, and I'd updates every hour asking where I was because the production line had actually stopped.
Because you had to get there.
Absolutely.
Good
and the
grief.
thing is, if you can't pick up these goods, right, literally within an hour and a half, and have them in the UK the same day or the next day, then the just-in-time supply chain ceases to exist.
And this is what they're explaining. This is what Airbus, when they said we can't, it's critical for our business to ensure that the wings we build in the UK can get to France and Germany for the assembly line. They're just telling you the simple truth. When Jaguar Land Rover say if there's any pauses, if there's any friction at all, we won't build the cars here. BMW saying exactly the same. Nissan saying almost exactly. They're just stating facts. And I think the reason why you've touched so many people or opened so many eyes is that it's a little bit hard to swallow when it's some, mysterious executive on £1 squillion a year who runs Jaguar Land Rover and talks about £80 billion budgets. The reason you were on that stage and the reason why half of Fleet Street beat a path to your door was very simply because you were describing it in terms that even I can understand, Kieran, and that really is saying something. That's it, though, isn't it? It's the same facts. You're just describing them on a day-to-day small business level, exactly the same facts that the Chief Executive Jaguar Land Rover is explaining on a 5-year £80 billion level.
I tell you what, Piers Morgan put in a tweet last week.
Yeah, steady.
If we could survive, refer to 1975. If we could survive then, we'll survive now. But then, do you know what? You go back and you look at true facts and you look at passenger numbers that come over from Europe into the UK. I think in 1985, something like 800,000 trucks passed through Dover Port, whereas today it's 2.6 million.
Yes.
And it tells you all you need to know, just how much it's expanded.
Well, yeah, but then you're dealing in facts and statistics. I didn't see the tweet you referred to, but a lot of people suggest that everything will be fine because we didn't all die prior to joining the common market. And that's absolutely true, but nobody campaigned on saying we won't actually die. That's not what it said on the side of the bus. Vote Brexit, and the good news is you won't actually die immediately after leaving. The whole point is it's supposed to be better than it is now. Humanity got by fine before fire was discovered, but you wouldn't vote to abandon fire. Humanity survived before the wheel was invented. And no one would say, let's abolish the wheel, because we were fine. We carried everything everywhere on our backs, and we were fine before the wheel was... It's a position that I genuinely don't quite understand. It's almost as if you're trying to fit the facts to the feeling. And as we've established in the past, it's the feelings that have led us into this mess. Kieran, back on the road, my friend. Good luck. 10:46. What's the fig leaf at the moment on the Airbus, BMW, Jaguar Land Rover? What is the fig leaf? Because, I know Owen Paterson on Radio 4 this morning was trying to say that the Chief Executive of Jaguar Land Rover doesn't understand running Jaguar Land Rover as well as Owen Paterson does, but one trade body has already responded to that by saying we're not even going to dignify the comments with a response. It's so cretinous. That's my word, not the trade bodies. It's so utterly cretinous. It'd be like arguing with someone about whether the moon is made of cheese. You'd be getting the late Patrick Moore on the programme to have an argument about whether the moon might actually be made of cheese. Do you think he'd come in and do that? I'm not coming on a programme to talk about cheese and the moon. It's ridiculous. So that is where we are now. Jacob Rees-Mogg trying to explain import-export to people who do import-export for a living. And this, little anecdotal things that come into my programme on a daily basis. James, we've just ordered some blinds from China, and we got an email saying that we have been advised that the customs delay could be up to 10 days. That's what happens when you're bringing stuff in from China. So what's going on is part of the question. And what's the current fig leaf? I don't know what it is, actually. I heard Digby Jones on with Nick earlier sort of saying that they sell us so much that they'll have to agree to a system that allows them to carry in. But we've known for more than 2 years that the German car industry has already said that protecting the integrity of the single market is a long-term higher priority for us than, regrettably, the potential loss of some British custom, the German car. But then we're back to the same thing again, aren't we? Digby Jones claiming to know more about the German car industry than the people that run the German car industry. Oh, it's insane. Absolutely insane. And how do people like me make a warm welcome for people like you, if now you recognise that the sheer weight of evidence has become irresistible? Coventry, massively vote for Coventry. It's about 85 to 65,000 if memory serves. And Coventry is going to get absolutely kebabbed if Jaguar Land Rover go anywhere. Kebabbed. The IPPR think tank today publishing research that shows the areas that voted leave, because they're generally poorer areas, are going to be hit harder. They're going to end up poorer with a higher cost of living. And again, I'll tell you who I really am cross with. Well, you know who I'm cross with. It's like the people who own the Ritz, or the Sun, or the Daily Mail, or the Daily Telegraph, or who somehow managed to find a sort of bunch of fag packet fascists and stinking spivs to sell the idea that they were on the side of the left behind. The blokes that own the Ritz casting themselves as doughty defenders of the left behind. Rupert Murdoch protecting the poor of Britain. The Daily Mail sticking up for people who aren't well. I mean, that is the really evil con here. The really evil con, isn't it? Oh, yes, I'm sticking up for the ordinary working class people. How? Well, by helping them lose their jobs. Worst case scenario, best case scenario, well, by helping them lose some of the workplace protections that we've fought over decades to secure. And what do they get that's a positive? Well, I suppose we could fish. 10:53 is the time. Matthew Thompson is in Salisbury, where, as you'll be aware, a man and a woman have reportedly been exposed to Novichok, an astonishing development that follows fast upon, of course, the poisoning of the ex-Russian spy Sergei Skripal in the same area with the same nerve agent. Matthew, what have you learned?
Well, James, the prevailing sense here in Salisbury this morning is one of shock. I've been here since early this morning, and it was just weeks after Prince Charles and Camilla were here to lift the spirits of the area in the aftermath of that March attempted murder of Sergei and Yulia Skripal, and yet they've had to wake up to the shock of yet another Novichok poisoning in its midst. So what do we know? I'm afraid we know a lot less than we should really at this stage. It has been confirmed that Novichok was used. The two victims are being named locally as Dawn Sturgis, who's 44, and Charles Rowley, who's 45. They're both in a critical condition in the Salisbury District Hospital, where I am right now. Now, the Metropolitan Police have taken charge of the investigation from Wiltshire Police. They announced that last night. And Assistant Commissioner Neil Basu said it couldn't be confirmed whether the nerve agent came from the same batch that Mr. Skripal and Yulia were exposed to. But, I mean, that's widely assumed to be the leading theory, that there was some sort of cross-contamination from leftover Novichok that was used against the Skripals. And that, James, is important because it will raise significant questions for the police and security services about the effectiveness of the multi-million-pound clean-up that was instigated in the aftermath of the March attack. And only today, for example, Public Health England has said that members of the public should avoid picking up discarded objects as a precaution. Now, should that advice have been given out much earlier, for instance, and the government, the police and Public Health England had repeatedly said that Salisbury was safe, and it's fairly clear now that that wasn't the case, with obviously tragic consequences. Although I do want a little note of caution that England's Chief Medical Officer Sally Davies has made plain this morning that the risk to the general public remained low. And that's probably a secondary concern to the authorities at the moment. The real priority is finding out exactly where that contamination occurred. Now, there are several sites across Amesbury and Salisbury which have been sealed off last night and this morning, and I'm in contact with a few people who lived in the same hostel as one of the victims of this, and they in Salisbury, and they say that, as I just a few minutes before I came on to speak to you, that they're being evacuated from that hostel. So I can't independently confirm that with my own eyes, but I've no reason to doubt them, and that will clearly possibly be a precaution, but it is also, it factors into that frantic search by police for the source of this contamination with Novichok.
Are you worried?
Am I worried?
Yeah.
No, I believe the advice that the public are not exposed, and this is one. It happened 6 days ago, James. This happened on Saturday, and Public Health England's advice is that if you were in any of these areas between Friday night and Saturday afternoon, then you should probably get yourself checked. But otherwise, it's likely to have been washed away by things like rain.
I see.
Also, these things decay. So I'm not wearing my hazardous materials suit quite yet.
And this is my contender for the least professional question that you'll be asked this week. Is it possible that the authorities actually know more than they have made publicly available? Because to tell the public not to worry when two members of the public are in hospital having been poisoned seems a little bit counterintuitive.
It does seem strange, you're absolutely right, but then again you would want to have all of your ducks in a row, especially if the ultimate finger points at Russia. Do you know what I mean? That is obviously, Russia is the name that circulates as soon as we mention Novichok and poisoning, and I think if you are the government, in their defence, you want to make sure you have all the evidence in place and you have a proper dossier. We know that Cobra is meeting imminently, Sajid Javid chairing his first ever meeting of the government's emergency committee, but you can understand why if they do have information, they want to make sure they have it all before they release it, because it could have not only consequences for the police and emergency services here, but serious diplomatic consequences on an international scale.
Matthew Thompson live, as you heard, from the Salisbury General Hospital, where two members of the public, believed to be Charlie Rowley and Dawn Sturgis, are in a critical condition after being exposed to the nerve agent Novichok, the same nerve agent with which the ex-Russian spy Sergei Skripal was poisoned. I'm enjoying this, I've got to be honest with you. I think what I'd like to do is assemble an army of Kierans, because you and me aren't going to be sitting down to dinner with the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover anytime soon, are we? We're not going to bump into the bloke what runs Airbus in the Dog and Duck tonight. But we could easily be having a packet of crisps with a Kieran, or having a chat with a person who's running a business that is, you know, successful and thriving, but massively under threat, in the same way that the massive businesses are under threat. It's kind of a bit of a hallmark of this programme to look through the correct end of the telescope. I'm not fetishising big business. I've never been one of those people who doffs his cap and tugs his forelock at someone just because they are very wealthy, or just, in fact, I'm a bit chippy sometimes. I kind of go the opposite way, with Tolstoy on that one, and behind every great crime there's a great fortune. It's a little simplistic, but the Kierans of this world, there's no great crimes there, and they're having their livelihoods turned upside down. Has anybody had anything? I'm just going to have a private conversation with the producer if you want to talk amongst yourselves. Has anybody got anything positive to say about the potential changes to imports and exports? Anybody who's got a dog in the race or flesh in the game that could actually paint this as apart from absolute hogwash like Owen Paterson, is there anybody who runs businesses who's rung in to say things are actually good? No? Well, if I've just described you, I'll make room for you in the next hour. The other subject that we're going to get up in the air, I think we'll spin a couple of plates. Esther McVeigh, how the hell has she still got a job? Is the time to we carry on a little bit with the impact that the uncertainty that has prompted the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover to warn that £80 billion worth of investment and 40,000 British jobs are now at risk. I want the smaller scale impact of the same uncertainties on you, or indeed what would happen to your business if you had to operate in a Europe where there was friction between countries, between us and the rest of the current single market. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. And the second question this hour is and look, I've got no warmth left for this government. Even the decent people in it, I think, now have been silent and cowed for too long to deserve the support of any of us. I say the same for what it's worth, although I'm probably wasting my breath, about the Labour front bench. The idea that you can have a cabinet now that has rubbished collective cabinet responsibility, Boris Johnson, rubbished individual ministerial responsibility, Chris Grayling, and yesterday tore up the ministerial code for for the foreseeable future, Esther McVeigh, and still be level pegging or slightly ahead or slightly behind in the polls, is an appalling reflection upon the Labour leadership. Absolutely appalling. And even in today's news, where they say the warning is a klaxon, they're not offering anything different. Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn, you can't get a Rizzler between them when it comes to the fudging and the mealy-mouthed obfuscation on Brexit. So I hold no torch for this government, but don't think that it's due to any particular affection for the other current choices before us. But Esther McVeigh has broken the ministerial code. How can she still be in her job? I don't know how you're going to answer that question, but I'm going to give you a chance to try in a minute. So 2 things this hour, a bit of Brexit, a bit of Esther McVeigh, Universal Credit. 6 minutes after 11 is the time, and we may hear as well this hour from Sajid Javid, who's currently chairing a Cobra emergency committee meeting regarding that nerve agent story down in Salisbury. But before all of that, Terry is in Angers in France. Terry, before you tell me why you've rung in, can I offload on you briefly?
Yep.
When my
Good morning.
hello, mate. If my radars go down, which they're going to have to do soon, because the listening figures, we can't sustain them at this level, will you send in a letter pointing out that today I've had 2 calls from France, a call from Norway, and a call from Ireland? None of them get radar diaries, so all of these listeners aren't being counted. Can I leave that with you?
You can.
Right, now, why did you ring in?
I just wanted to reiterate the fact that if we don't have any kind of customs agreement with Europe, it's not only the Jaguar Land Rover jobs that are at risk, but there's also a massive part of the haulage industry that will go under.
Because they don't work directly for Jaguar Land Rover.
Yeah, well, we're not going to get the contract.
But they're your big customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are you doing in France?
Of our business.
What are you doing in Angers at the moment?
I'm actually picking up parts for another customer, which isn't Jaguar Land Rover, for Bombardier.
But you do drive for do you do deliveries for Jaguar Land Rover as well?
Absolutely, yeah. They're one of our biggest customers.
So you are a lorry driver currently on a job for Bombardier, who also does just-in-time deliveries for Jaguar Land Rover.
Jaguar Land Rover and Nissan.
But you know what that means. You know what you're going to get, don't you, Terry?
Yeah, P45.
Well, before you get your P45, mate, you get a Ray Liotta.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you build it.
I'm honoured.
Well, it's not much of a compensation if you really are fearful of losing your job. Why are you fearful of losing your job? What is it that you're hearing from the politicians that makes you think if they spent 10 minutes in my cab, they would change their tune immediately?
I'm hearing no sense from the politicians whatsoever. I think a lot of people who voted Brexit did so thinking that the government was strong enough to carry it off. Well, I'm sorry, but the thought of them having to work for a living to look after our country instead of Brussels doing it, I think is terrifying them. I think they're too scared to do it.
But I mean, in the context, you might be right. There is a case to be made for if they delayed Article 50 and got their ducks in a row before triggering it, then we could have extricated ourselves in a much more equitable manner. But the thing that intrigues me is how, with reference to the borders, with reference to no customs checks, no friction whatsoever, your jobs, you heard Kieran earlier saying that, you know, he gets a phone call tracking him hourly because if he doesn't turn up with the parts, then the whole production line grinds to a halt. I didn't realise this till I saw a report about the factory in Sunderland, the Nissan factory up in Sunderland, where it literally turns around on minutes, doesn't it? Not on days. They don't keep stuff in warehouses for months. It arrives and it pretty much gets stuck into a car that minute.
Yeah, that's the only way they're going to solve the problem if we don't have any kind of customs arrangement, is to build loads of warehouses and stock up on goods. But the firms aren't going to do that because of a major cost. They're going to have to pay for their goods 3 months in advance.
And because they can avoid building a warehouse simply by hopping over the channel.
Yeah, it's just not feasible. If we haven't got that customs arrangement, then there's going to be not only the production workers out of work, but all the ancillary workers as well, including an awful lot of the haulage industry.
Now, you heard, were you reassured by the words of Sir Digby Chicken that you just heard in the news bulletin when he said if Brussels are stupid enough to do this, yada yada, gammon gammon, fish fish? Did that reassure you at all?
No, not at all, because this country seeming to think it's got such influence over Europe. We're only a small part. It's a hiccup for Europe, is Brexit.
It's a big hiccup, mate. It's more of a retch.
It's not the end.
It's a dry
it's not
retch.
The end of the world for Brussels. It's a massive hiccup for us, but.
And I mean, if Owen Paterson is correct, and you do lose your job because these customs checks and these borders are going to play havoc with the just-in-time supply chains, you could perhaps get a new job as someone who goes to China to pick up car parts and then brings them back by, well, I don't know, Lilo.
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah. If they supply the paddles, yeah,
you'll be fine. You know. It's why I prefer, in a way, talking to you and Kieran than talking to the kind of the chief execs and the business people, because there's There's just a clarity of thought that comes from personal experience. You're sitting there now in your cab, just as likely to have been on a job for Jaguar Land Rover as you are to be on a job for Bombardier. Bombardier are going to face, they'll probably be next to come out, will they, if they haven't already, and warn that they won't be able to build trains if the supply chain is in any way slowed down. That is just the bottom line. So, final question, and it's a bit repetitive, but how do you process it? When you sit there and you look at what is happening and you then compare it to the reality of your day-to-day experience, and you might have an answer to this question because I haven't, how do you actually account for people like Sir Digby Chicken and Owen Paterson?
Headless and chicken comes to mind.
Yeah? Yeah.
That'd be the first phrase that would come into my mind.
Fair enough.
Running around like headless chickens, and they really haven't got a clue. And I wish people with that kind of education would actually go out and sit with people that are going to be affected by this.
That's all they have to do. Kieran's put in several offers, and I'll add you to the list as well. You need to check your health and safety, Terry. I don't want you getting in any bother for inviting politicians into your cab. But we should do that. Someone should do it. So we get Owen Paterson in the cab with you. Get him to explain. There's a man there, and we laughed, and only because he offered it up in a light-hearted fashion. I said, you know what you're going to get? He said, P45. Owen Paterson on the radio earlier saying, oh, well, they bring stuff in from China. You can just sod off, Terry, mate. You and your job, you and your livelihood, Kieran and his built-up business. Just, sorry, fellas. Off you jog. Owen Paterson, the man that said the Badger cull didn't work because the Badgers moved the goalposts. John is in Hatfield. John, what have you got?
Well, I wonder if Owen Paterson and Jacob Rees-Mogg know more about promoting a major American rock and roll tour around Europe than promoters of major American rock and roll shows do.
I like you already, John. I like you already.
Because the way that a European tour works is this. You will land in Heathrow because it's easier. It's a carnet. You are temporarily importing the equipment, whether it's Beyonce, Foo Fighters, whoever it might be.
You've done this, obviously.
Stadium I used to do this. I am now retired. All my friends now do.
Fair enough.
Now, if you bring the equipment in, you get a carnet because you are temporarily importing the equipment. Once you are in the country, you are in the country. That country is now the EU. Now, if there are borders between France, Belgium and Dover, you are now going into another country. Promoters don't know what the logistics are going to be. And I'll give you an example of adjusting time.
Yeah.
Foo Fighters load out of the London Stadium at midnight, 8 hours to Paris. You've got an army of 140 stage crew. You've got doors at 6 p.m. the following day. If we come, they will build it. If we don't come, they can't. If we're held up at Dover, well, no one knows what's going on.
No. Sir Digby Chicken knows what's going on.
Well, he does, So if anybody who works for Edwin Shirley Trucking, Trans Am Trucking, or even Rocket Cargo is listening, I'd like them to phone in. Because
mate, steady on. I want the Foo Fighters to phone in. I'm aiming higher than you.
Mr. Grohl.
Dave Grohl. You'll get a Ray Liotta, I promise. Yeah. But you're retired, so obviously it's your field of expertise, but it's not actually going to rob you of your livelihood like it potentially could the last caller. I'll ask you the same question I asked him. When you hear Jacob Rees-Mogg or Digby Chicken or Owen Paterson explaining that you're wrong, that you don't understand the business you spent your whole life in, and genuinely talking as if they believe that they're right and you're wrong, how do you process that?
With extreme prejudice. That it's now gone beyond any semblance of anger.
Yes, this is it. This is what I want. I want your psychology, because anger's pointless. Anger gets you nowhere.
Because the point is that you're now having politicians telling people what their jobs are. Any other job, whether that's be Kieran running his van business, whether you are promoting a major American rock and roll production around Europe, your man bringing in train parts for Bombardier. Oh, no, I know better. Yes. I wore a monocle when I was sick.
Yes.
It's like... I I can't put it into words without expletives that it's making. Anger is now gone beyond that.
Yes.
But the point is, uncertainty is the word. It's the uncertainty. Because if you are transporting stuff between two separate countries, if you bring a show to America, you're in America, whether it's in Tennessee or Baltimore. You're just driving around. It's the same thing here. And what you said about road signs, you get to Calais, you go up the ramp, right? It says right, Bruxelles, à droite, Paris.
Right is à droite, you fool.
Well, whatever it is, I don't know. Whatever it is.
Bit of franglais.
Whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, à gauche, Bruxelles.
Ah, merci.
You know.
Yes, I do know. And I love hearing your voice, because it is a sort of spluttering incomprehension, if I could describe it thus, John. And it's not just, of course, the music industry. A lot of people have been in touch. This fellow here says this guy is bang on. It will be exactly the same when it comes to the film industry and conferences as well. They will also benefit from the carnet. Is it carnet or carnet? Carnet.
Well, yeah.
Tomato. But these are the things I didn't understand. They are temporary imports. And
yeah, the other thing is, if you work in motorsport, MotoGP, Superbikes, Formula One, you're bringing all of these expensive items into the country temporarily. You have an importation carnet, whatever it is, and then because you're taking it out after the specified time. No one knows what's going on.
Nobody knows.
He might know. He voted leave.
Get Bernie Eccleston, all right? Well, if he's listening, he'd be welcome. 0345 606 0973. John, mind how you go. What was your favourite band to promote? Who did you have the most fun with backstage?
It's got to be the boys from Down Under, AC/DC.
John, looking at the coalface of British business, actually, in the context of Brexit, and by accident, and this is always down to you rather than me, I can't pretend I planned it this way. Obviously, I've got high regard for Kieran, whose van driving exploits have seen him picked up over from Sky News to the People's Vote March, because he just described his day. And suddenly a lot of this stuff about frictionless trade and just-in-time supply chains and customs unions and single markets, suddenly it all made sense because he just described his day. Like the fella in Angers in France a moment ago, Terry, like John, who's a rock promoter, retired rock promoter, explaining how you cannot put a gig on here and be in Paris in time for tomorrow night's gig if you don't have completely clear customs arrangements. And we don't have them, potentially, which is why the head of Jaguar Land Rover has warned 80 billion quid's worth of investment could be under threat. And I just want to carry on, because no one ever listens to the people at the coalface. You've got the owners of the Ritz claiming that they speak up for ordinary people, you know, while actually the only people they seem to be speaking up for are those who made hundreds of millions of pounds out of shorting the pound on the night of the referendum. Who speaks up for Kieran? Who speaks up for Terry? Who speaks up for John? Who speaks up for you? And the workers, this is where the challenge, this is where the country really does have to come together. The workers who voted for their own pain. The poorest parts of the country, Coventry, which would be smashed to pieces if Jaguar Land Rover go anywhere. It's my dad's old patch. And it's not just Jaguar Land Rover. It used to be a Peugeot factory at Ryton. I mean, you talk about the British car industry, you have to kind of hold your nose and pretend that it is British. It's not really. It's largely foreign-owned and foreign-run, but the people working in those factories are British. The money that they earn is spent in British shops. It's the British economy that is sustained by those salaries and wages. It'd be nice if we owned it as well. It'd be even nicer if the government owned some of it, but hey, Rome wasn't built in a day. So I'm going to carry on, just you, your personal experiences, your business, how you think it's going to be affected, and also what you think is going to happen next, because we should try to find some silver linings or some rose-tinted spectacles at least. It is, look, we're not going to be like Venezuela. We're not going to be catching rats and eating them. It's not going to be a Mad Max-style apocalypse. It's a figure of speech that's quite fanciful and funny. But it's highly unlikely that anyone can paint a picture that would constitute an improvement on current arrangements, and that is what 17 million people believed was on the way. Matthew's at Heathrow. Matthew, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, well, basically, I mean, I was a Remainer, accepted, we're going to be leaving, but basically I think Theresa May is going to basically do a free trade deal with Northern Ireland, with Europe. So Northern Ireland will unfortunately be treated separately.
So then the border moves to the Irish Sea?
Yeah, that's it. But, I mean, that's...
The DUP, mate, the DUP are propping up the government, and they won't tolerate that.
Yeah, they're going to put it in the long grass, and for the next election, I mean, the Conservatives, I think, are going to win, and they'll dump the DUP, but I think they're going to put Ireland to one side, get that special trade deal for just Northern Ireland, and unfortunately, it looks like, the rest of the UK is going to be on WTO rules, but we are going to actually be doing free trade arrangements for certain industries so we don't lose jobs, possibly for the car industry, aerospace. And I mean, I've been involved in international transport like Kieran. I mean, I used to run my own company. And
what do you do now?
Well, at the moment, I mean, unfortunately, I mean, I lost my company to a German company. I mean, they started up here. They, even the German government...
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, the German government actually sort of pays the wages of people here so to support the German companies. But basically, I think Brexit, we are going to get a bit more control of the work going to and from the UK.
How?
And that is going to be more positive.
I mean, I've heard a lot of words. I just want to get a bit closer to the ideas here. So, to clarify, you think that Northern Ireland will be sacrificed on the altar of Brexit. The DUP will be told to clear off. Theresa May will get it through because she's going to win the next general election with a bigger majority than she currently has. Will then come out on WTO rules, which everybody from the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover down to van drivers like Kieran describe as absolutely disastrous. But you think we'll be better off in the long run because...
Well, because basically the WTO rules are not going to kick in for until the end of the transition, what's going to be hopefully a couple of years. So everyone's going to get...
Well, hang on, is that before or after the next general election that Theresa May wins with a bigger majority than she's currently got?
Well, I mean, basically it will... I mean, she's going to win the next general election so she could dump the DUP and carry on with the same plans.
Right.
During this
So they're not the same plans. They're completely new plans that involve moving the Irish border to the Irish Sea.
Well, yeah, that's right. They're going to have to move to the Irish Sea to keep Northern Ireland, but we're going to actually get hopefully lots of acceptance for free trade. I mean,
what sort of things? Well, I mean, because we've got what is it? We've got the biggest single market in the world and 47 separate free trading agreements. I forget the actual number of countries that are caught up in that. So, how are we going to end up with more than what we've currently got?
Yeah. I mean, those current free trade deals will then, we hope, will roll over.
No, they've said they won't. They can't roll them over until they know what our trading arrangements are like. And something like moving the Irish border to the Irish Sea is going to have quite a profound effect on anybody who, for example, does business with Ireland. So how are we going to end up better off? That's what I'm interested in. If we've currently got, arguably, I mean... Potentially, if you look at the trade Germany does with China, if we could boost that kind of thing, we are in such a strong position in terms of the trading agreements we've already got with countries around the world. How are we going to end up with better trading arrangements when we are offering 60 million customers instead of 500 million?
Because I believe most of the money is in the UK, and they're the ones going to be calling the shots. So
what money is in the UK?
Well, there's lots of investments from all around the world, and I think they'd rather invest...
What do you mean? Yeah, but they invest in the UK now because we're in the single market, don't they?
Well, yeah, but then...
So what makes you think that more money will come here if we leave the single market? And again, I just want you to focus on the question of why, as a businessman, you'd be more excited about a market with 50 million customers in it than you are about a market with 600 million.
Yeah, but we're still going to be working closely together with Europe, and we're going to get special trade deals.
How do you know? What do you mean a special trade deal? What are you talking about?
You know, during the transition arrangement, that is when they're going to sort out. I think we're just going to give Theresa May a chance to...
Okay, final chance, with love and respect. As a former businessman, and I'm sorry that you lost your business, would you be more excited by a potential client who had 500 million customers or a potential client who had 60 million customers?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities coming up.
Yeah, okay. So 500 million customers or 60 million customers? For someone selling to customers, what's more attractive?
Well, I mean, obviously, the bigger one is more attractive.
Right.
But we'll give the opportunities for...
You can't carry on talking now.
basically, I mean...
No, you can't. You can't say obviously 500 million customers, but opportunities. You just can't, mate.
Yeah, no, but there is basically, I mean, Land Rover...
No, but basically you just can't.
That Land Rover has got to get their act together.
Land Rover have got their act together, and they've explained that if the government doesn't allow us to continue trading as we trade now, we will go and move our production facilities to countries where we can continue trading like we trade now. Oh, and those production facilities will be in a market that has 440 million people in it, while we're stuck here with 60 million and no factories. Don't say but opportunities, just don't.
We've got to wait to see what trade arrangements there is.
No, but you've already told me you know what the trade arrangements are going to be.
Well, I'm sure they're going to...
Before you admitted that it is always more attractive to have 500 million potential customers than it is to have 60 million. Where'd you get... Forgive me, this is going to sound patronising. We'll part as friends, I promise. We can high-five each other on the way out. Where'd you get your news from?
Well, I mean, I've been in this transport business for a long time.
Yeah, where'd you get your news about the EU from?
No, I listen to LBC and...
Well, you need to start listening to me more. There are no tears saltier than the tears of a gammon. I don't know if you've noticed that. It's probably because it's cured for so long. And there are many, many gammony tears flowing today as it becomes absolutely irresistible to conclude that we are embarked upon an act of almost, for me, incomprehensible, but as things stand... an act of incomparable self-harm. And what we've done today, if you're just joining us, unintentionally actually, but it's the way things have shaken down, we looked at how normal businesses will be affected rather than mega businesses, which are often foreign-owned. Not that that's particularly pertinent to the conversation, but it is pertinent to the ease with which they'll make a decision to relocate. So, you know, Tata owns Jaguar Land Rover, German chief executive, Indian owners. They're not going to feel a degree of heritage or legacy towards Coventry Cathedral or the good burgers of Stratford-upon-Avon. They're just not. They don't want to move because it's a hassle. No one wants to move, except my wife, who always wants to move. I never want to move, even when I should move, because it's a right old hassle moving. But, you know, if I'm going to be considerably worse off staying here than I would be going there, I'm going to move, even if it means 40,000 people lose their job. But we've been talking to the ordinary workers, if you like, you know, people like you and me. We don't own multinational companies, we don't run multinational companies, but we do increasingly have to conclude that Owen Paterson, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Sir Digby Chicken Caesar have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. It's quite incredible. And broadcast organisers have no choice but to keep booking them because no one who actually speaks for the government will put their head above the parapet. It is just bizarre now. And, I mean, Matthew's optimistic analysis before the news notwithstanding, we haven't found anyone with a dog in the race who thinks differently. It's quite incredible. But we're not going to give up. Andy's in Liverpool. Andy, what would you like to say?
Brexit's now starting to affect my work life as well as my personal life.
Go on.
Well, I spoke to you before, James. I love on the Irish border. Literally back doors in the Republic and front doors in the north.
I remember, yes. It was funny then. I'm not laughing as much now as I did when you first told me.
It was funny at the time, but as I say now, I am, moving on from Terry's point, I drive a car transporter. Terry does parts, I actually move cars.
Right.
Since yesterday, I've had 7 cancellations of Land Rover movements to go back to Ireland.
Why?
Well, they've just put it down to limited stock.
So they're cutting their cloth already. Well, this could just be an anomaly, or it could have nothing to do with Brexit, couldn't it?
Well, it's been going on, not just with Land Rover, but VW have what they're calling limited stock at the minute as well. And if you talk to any salesman in any showroom or dealership in the country, they'll tell you how hard it is now to get stock, which is my bread and butter.
Why is it hard to get stock? Do you know?
Nobody has any answers. They either just tell you it's limited stock or there are unforeseen circumstances, but that is as much of an answer as you can get from anyone.
Well, what's your theory then?
I literally think that some of these companies are stepping back and just waiting to see what is going to happen. I would say Land Rover's probably stepping back down, keeping stock in case they do have to move location to Europe.
Now, this is speculative, but it's based upon personal experience of, I mean, you've lost 7 jobs, you said yourself.
Well, from yesterday, I was supposed to collect 7 Land Rovers and take them back to Ireland.
Right, so one job involving 7 vehicles.
one job involving 7 vehicles, but that has now been. Well, they haven't cancelled it. They said they've withheld it, or they're pushing it back.
Gosh.
But again, they won't give us any explanation. Now, my boss runs 19 car transporters.
Yes.
And our main job is to bring cars from the UK to Ireland, North and Republic.
Blimey. And that is the coalface, isn't it?
Well, it's just going to make, as I say now, it's not only affecting my personal life, but now my bread and butter, my actual wage is going to be affected of it too, because I get paid for the loads that I do. So, Jaguar Land Rover cancelling 7 cars yesterday mightn't seem like a massive thing, but that's maybe the best part of £200-300 a week for me.
Yeah. And it's hard to say. I mean,
happening now, I may have to go and do what Terry does and just move over to car parts instead of the actual cars themselves.
And, well, I mean, Terry didn't sound like he was that optimistic about the future either.
He doesn't sound like it's going too well there either.
To be honest with you. What about Owen Patterson's reassurance that everything will be fine because we'll be able to buy stuff from China?
How does that reassure anyone?
I don't know. I was kind of hoping you could tell me.
Well, it doesn't reassure me at the end of the day. As you say, I'm on the ground, personal experience. I'm doing this job. I love the cars. I take them back and forward. How does Owen Patterson know that we're going to be able to but bring stuff in from China instead?
What about Sir Digby Chicken Caesar and his reassurances that you've got nothing to worry about?
I caught some of him briefly this morning.
Yeah. Some of ham, did you say, or some of him?
It was with Nick Ferrari, I think he was on this morning, wasn't he?
He's on our bulletins as well. You can pick it up on our bulletin.
Well, the only impression I got from Sir Digby was that his head's in the clouds.
That's very polite.
It's not reality. He's not living in reality. What he's, I can't remember now exactly what he was saying, but I just remember this morning thinking to myself, this man's living on cloud cuckoo land.
And I mean, we can't conclude that you're right. When you
I mean, I just wanted to give you my personal...
No, I get it. Well, let me know if it carries on like this, because we'll return to these issues and we'll come at it from the angle of people like you and Terry and Kieran and John and everybody else who is actually just doing it instead of moving their fun to Dublin and pretending that life for everybody else is going to be just dandy. Andy, mind how you go. And what about home, though? Well, this
is I was going to say, my boss is now doesn't know how, in the future, how easy we're going to be able to take cars from north to south. And how, well, actually, my boss is actually based on the border as well. 7 miles one way is the Republic and 2 miles the other way is the north. And he's starting to worry now about, is he going to have to find a new yard? What way is it going to work with customs checks coming in and out of the north and the Republic? And even if you move the border to the water or to the Irish Sea, which, as you said, is never going to happen because the DUP are never going to allow it to happen. Even if you do that, it's still going to make the normal lorry driver's life more difficult.
And these are just facts. These are just facts.
Come back home.
And these are the facts of your experience. Well, look, I mean, no one is hoping that what you fear transpires. No one is hoping that what the chief executive of Jaguar Land Rover fears actually transpires. No one is hoping that what the head of Airbus thinks or fears is going to transpire. No one wants what the head of BMW in this country fears to transpire. And I sincerely hope you're wrong, Andy, but until someone can offer up a viable alternative to what you described, we're going to have to fear that you are right. 0345 6060 973 is the number if you are that person. Anthony is in Luton. Anthony, what can you tell us?
Yeah, good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
I used to be one of these long-distance truckers that used to take parts from this country to Fords and Opel in Germany, and we used to have to do a whole 10 hours driving once we left Dover to get to the car plants in Germany, because if we didn't get there for any reason at all and the production line had stopped, my company would have to pay millions of pounds to compensate for the stopping of the line. I mean, as it was when I was working, we were starting to lose a lot of work to the Eastern Europeans who could do the same job for less than half the price, and they could lay on 2 drivers to one driver from Britain. So what's happening now is going to be the death knell of general haulage in this country, because the Eastern Europeans have been laying on just as expensive trucks, but they pay half the price for their drivers. And if the companies are moved to Eastern Europe and all that, that would be the end of our haulage country.
I know that there's is it Slovenia where they've moved one of the Jaguar Land Rover things, but my information is that you're more likely to see stuff relocate to Germany and France. Airbus, I'm told, in Hamburg is gearing up perhaps for some of the business that will come from Airbus Britain, rather than Eastern European countries, because it will be a case of expanding plants they've already got rather than building plants from scratch.
I mean, the one thing
Slovakia, not Slovenia.
The one thing that a lot of people who are making some noise about, getting the country back and everything, they really don't know how the whole system works. The big car companies in this country and the car companies in Europe are all like one. They're connected.
Yes.
We take parts from this country to Germany and to Switzerland and all that, and we pick up parts from there to bring down here. My company used to lay on about 15 or 20 lorries a week just to sit outside the ZF car gearbox factory in Saarbrücken in Germany, to pick up loads of gearboxes to bring down to Land Rovers and to Fords and all that. And, we had absolutely no problem with any borders or anything. You just drive straight through them. You do your 10 hours driving, and then you spend about 4 or 5 hours waiting to put have the parts taken off.
But this again, Gary puts it very well. Just talking normal people describing their livelihoods and their days. No egos, just stating facts, sharing their personal day-to-day experiences. If people deny what they are saying, then there is no hope for them. And that is, I suppose, the grim reality that underpins all of our conversations today, is that I could line up 1 million Anthonys like you, or 1 million Kierans, or 1 million Terrys, 1 million Johns, 1 million Garys, you name it. I could line them up. 1 million, what's the Irish fella called? I can't remember his name. But and somehow still, these people on the sidelines, these Rees Moggs and these Pattersons and these Digby Joneses, they still say, no, I know more about the life you've lived and the life that you will live doing the job that you will do than you do. And I don't get that anymore, Anthony. I don't understand. I'm a pretty arrogant man, but I don't understand that. I don't understand arrogance when it clashes with delusion.
Well, right from the start, when the voting came up, I made up my mind right from the start that this is what you get when you get people who are total amateurs, who know nothing about the ins and outs of industry, making a decision about something that they really have no idea, and they keep batting on about, oh yes, it's going to be so simple. We can just have parts shipped from China and all that. But why would any company in their right mind wait for parts to come from China when they can get it almost the same day or the next day from Europe? I mean, it makes absolutely no sense at all.
It makes absolutely no sense at all, and that I think is the point at which we draw a line under today's discussions, because it just doesn't make any sense at all, unless I suppose you kind of just know that. No, I'm sorry, even then it doesn't make any sense at all. And this is the weirdest bit, the knowledge that these people must have. And I understand some of them, the ones that have investment funds or mysterious rich backers, you can get a logic to their position. They're going to make a killing out of this. But for everybody else, I mean, how can reality be denied by so many for so long? I do not know.